So Francesca, thank you so much for sitting with me today. It's been, for me, a long time coming, wanting to interview you and sit with you finally in person. So thank you. Grateful for this opportunity. And I'm hoping we can cover just a few things in general. And of course, we can go into the details of those things. The ongoing genocide, of course, in Gaza, how your response has been to it, and what you see as Palestinian self-determination versus, say, charity or just humanitarian aid alone. I'm wondering if we can start off maybe by looking at how did your life change as a rapporteur after October 7th?
My life has definitely changed after October 7, 2023. It was already busy and with a lingering sense of pain due to natural compassion that I think most of us carry as human beings, and the situation in the occupied Palestinian territory for Palestinians was very heavy. So this has intensified because the pain by overexposure to what has happened in Gaza and then in the West Bank, and what has been suffered by everyone, by the Palestinians, the Israelis, but what has been done heavily to the Palestinians from Israelis has been life-changing. And of course this has changed who I am as a special rapporteur. Sometimes I feel less lightful or less, I feel like hardened. Mm-hmm. But how, I mean, it has, from a strictly professional point of view, this past months have been much busier than everything else I've ever done or experienced in my life. For 1 year, I've been almost on call to partners, colleagues, victims, and anyone who wanted to report to me. I've had this crazy no-door policy, basically, for 1 year. And then I had to take some distance and also create some space, but otherwise I've been really very much on call also for journalists and others who needed to understand what was going on, because there has been such a manipulation of the narrative that has made me feel more responsible, even more responsible to put the facts and their legal qualifications at the end of the at the center of the debate. And I've been simply more busy also because I've traveled much more. All of a sudden I experience something that is quite unprecedented for country mandate holders. I'm invited by state authorities or civil society, youth movements, Palestine solidarity movements to go and give lectures or to talk to government officials, to animate the national debate, which is somewhat a challenge in and of itself. And also it puts me at strain, in a difficult situation with government officials. But at the same time, so many governments are responsible for enabling what has happened to the Palestinians. Yeah, I take the challenge.
Yes. And since October 7th, you wrote at least 2 reports on the genocide. And of course, before that, before October 7th, you were also publishing. I'm just wondering if you can comment on the extent to which you see, taken together your writings, having an impact.
Well, look, in retrospect, it all makes sense, in the sense that I recently reread my Unchanneling report, the report I wrote about living conditions of children under occupation. And my third report, and then my second and first report, respectively, on detention, on arbitrary deprivation of liberty and self-determination. And when you read this report, it all makes sense. It was a tragedy. What has happened to Gaza, what is happening to Palestinians in Gaza, in the West Bank, in East Jerusalem, but all Palestinians, in fact, under Israeli rule. This is a tragedy foretold, because Israel's ambition to realize sovereignty for the Jewish people only, or for a majority of Jewish people, has to happen at the expense of the non-Jewish populations, the Palestinians, Muslim and Christians. And so, there is a natural escalation of repressive methods against the people as a whole, the people as a group, not seen as as individuals, but as trapped in an identity, trapped by identity politics. And so I've seen, I often say this past 16 months I've become an unwilling chronicler of a genocide. But look, if self-determination is the right to exist of a people as such, the denial of the right to exist of a people as such is genocidal. And so the ultimate enemy of genocide is the revendication of the right of self-determination. So it goes back to square zero, where I started my work and reflection, Palestinians in relation to a law of self-determination in 2022. Mm-hmm.
And do you remember the exact day that you were able to make the legal determination that a genocide is occurring? And how that might be, I just want to add one thing, how that might be different from what's called ethnic cleansing.
Look, what has happened to me in the past 60 months, it's something that is the culmination of a process. Since I worked on my main research project before becoming a special rapporteur, that led me to write Palestinian Refugees and International Law, which I published in 2020 with Oxford University Press. I did realize that we couldn't have a compartmentalized approach to international law. We couldn't distinguish we couldn't separate international humanitarian law from international humanitarian law. When it comes to Palestinian refugees who have lived across generations of lack of international, systematic, structural lack of state protection, I realized how the real protection of human beings is in the interplay of international law. And this is also what I see now as part of the decolonization of legal studies, seeing the value, the strength of international law from a people-centered perspective in the way international law can protect human beings. This is a general feeling that has accompanied me, and of course this has not been always present in terms of self-awareness, but this is what has happened. So to go back to your question, I've seen through my own work on, for example, on self-determination in 2022, on arbitrary deprivation of liberty and the protection of children, this mantra of international law is either to protect individuals or is not really human rights oriented, becoming an imperative for scrutinizing the conduct of Israel and international community in general toward Palestine and the Palestinians. With this in mind, when did I came to realize that genocide was ongoing? When I understood what genocide was. Because genocide is quite, or used to be, quite a niche topic in international law. So everyone who studies international law, international human rights law, international criminal law, studies genocide. But then somewhat it stays there. For example, throughout my career, I didn't have really the chance to deepen my knowledge of the ICJ jurisprudence on the cases of genocide until Palestine. And so I remember vividly, as you asked me for the day, I remember vividly that it was around the mid-October, Segal had already written about what was happening in Gaza as a textbook case of genocide. Ras is an incredibly principled human being, not just an incredible scholar, because already in February 2023, as I was writing my detention report, you had got in touch with me and say, you're the special rapporteur on the occupied Palestinian territory, why are you not using the genocide framework? And I was like, is he crazy? Why would I? Because even for me, I mean, genocide was Rwanda, genocide was the Holocaust of the Jews, genocide was what had been happening in Srebrenica. And this is when I was, so, and in mid-October, early mid-October, I wrote a press release, I wrote a statement denouncing the fact that Israel was clearly taking an opportunity to advance its ethnic cleansing of in the occupied Palestinian territory. And I will go back to this, but I understood what genocide was. I was forced to understand what genocide was when I had this discussion with other special rapporteurs. I remember I was in New York in preparation of the presentation of my report on the situation of children in the occupied Palestinian territories, or October 2023. And other colleagues, other special rapporteurs were saying, look at the statements of Israeli leaders, these are genocidal. And I was saying, yeah, but they've always said it. I said, but this is wrong. I mean, they shouldn't be saying that. And plus, they have declared a full closure, over the closure, no food, no water, no electricity, no fuel. This is one of, and they with the determination to punish the Palestinian people, to target the Palestinian people. This might lead to creating the conditions of life that would be physical and biological destruction for Palestinians. Thousands, if not tens of thousands of Palestinians in Gaza. All the more while heavy bombing was ongoing. And I was skeptical, so some colleagues said, you don't understand what genocide is, with all due respect, go and read what genocide is. And this was a trigger for me. All of a sudden, how come, I mean, of course there might be areas of law or that we do not know. But on Palestine, I have this thing, I know a lot, how come other people see things that I'm not seeing? And then it really didn't take me that long, because I started reading William Shabas or Ras Segal or Dirk Moses, Martin Shaw. But what probably was the most eye-opening of all, and this is besides legal scholar, is Raphael Lemkin, the scholar who's coined the term genocide. And I mean, the way he talks about the destruction of a people are something that it's a process, not an act, and something that happens and might happen in stages, but there are clearly some early warnings to understand what when the destruction of a people is an aim, a political aim. This was when all made sense. The denial of self-determination, the mass incarceration, the mass segregation, the separation, the fragmentation was already the curtailing of vital connections for the people. All of a sudden, the people appear to me as a body. And that was the target of genocide. And then I realized that there was still, and with this I will close the circle, I was saying we need to understand international law holistically. We tend to think of, is it self-determination or is apartheid? All of these stems from the same evil, which is the denial of the right of self-determination of the Palestinian people, which is the right to exist as a people in a given land. And it happens through various crimes, including apartheid, which is systematic segregation, domination of a group over another. with the intent to maintain the domination, and it entails the commission of inhumane acts in the process. And genocide, as the destruction of the group, can be a means to an end. I mean, it's not given in international criminal law that genocide must be the end. You want to kill or destroy the group to destroy the group. The motive is not relevant. And in this case, I'm 100% sure that the motive is ethnic cleansing. And not because I speculate, it's because Israeli leaders and the people at large, many in the Israeli society, are saying that the Palestinians must go. The Palestinians do not belong here. We need to annex. It will be ours from the river to the sea. And it goes on and on. It has been ongoing for 16 months relentlessly. But it's not new. This is something that was already ingrained in some, I mean, in not necessarily outspoken Israeli political mindset, but it was there. The Allon Plan from 1967 to expand Israeli control over what remains of historical Palestine. And so ethnic cleansing ethnic cleansing is, unlike genocide and apartheid, is not a crime, but ethnic cleansing is is the policy to render a given land ethnically homogeneous by eliminating other ethnicities through administrative procedures, segregation, or criminal acts, forced displacement, killing. So ethnic cleansing, as it was established by a UN commission leading to the consideration of the ICJ cases of genocide in former Yugoslavia, can consist of genocidal acts.
Yes.
And this is the case here.
Mm-hmm. I feel the need to ask, do you feel that the international community, notwithstanding at all, the widespread support for Palestine, especially among young people throughout the world, do you feel that the international community has largely failed Palestine?
Yes, the international community, in terms of member states, in terms of United Nations, have largely failed the Palestinian people. And this is not even something that dates back to the past 16 months. Again, as a tragedy foretold, this is something that the dismemberment of the Palestinian homeland and subsequently the Palestinian people is something that has been happening also through and thanks to the impunity that has been granted to Israel to continue to displace Palestinians and taking their land dunum after dunum, inch by inch, home by home, segregating communities, building exclusionary roads, creating prison-like encirclement for the Palestinians, creating conditions of life, making existence near survival. This has happened over 57 years in the little that remained of Palestine, in the Gaza Strip, the West Bank, and East Jerusalem, which for the past 30 years has been sort of discussed under the premise of an international consensus that recognized the occupied Palestinian territory as the land over which the Palestinians had an exclusive right to self-determination in the form of statehood, which doesn't mean that no Jewish people could have lived there. But had they lived there, they would have been Palestinian citizens and perhaps rented or purchased instead of stealing Palestinian property. So the demise of Palestine has happened and has gone hand in hand with their relentless reciting the mantra of the two-state solutions. How much hypocrisy! I mean, member states saying, "Oh, the only way forward is the two-state solutions," and then they wouldn't even recognize. I mean, states like Canada or Australia or Italy or the United States, everyone investing on the Palestinian Authority, right? Everyone talking about the state that we will be, even perfecting the functions and the paraphernalia of a state, while the primary element to have a state, the land, was disappearing under Palestinian feet.
Absolutely. You made a really interesting observation, or a statement in a previous interview not too long ago. I think it was with the Rights Forum, about how you would like to see one day an investigation into Western media's coverage of of the genocide. And I'm so curious to know, did you mean like a legal kind of investigation or journalistic kind of investigation in terms of its complicity or normalizing this genocide?
Well, there could be
Right.
many options. There should be many options, in fact, because accountability can be pursued in the most traditional ways through state authorities' investigations, being through ombudsman, quasi-judicial bodies, or the police itself, prosecutors, etc. I think that I've come across cases where there was the fabrications that have been spread by the Israeli state, the Israeli army, or others very close to the government, have been repeated consciously by certain media. The dehumanizing language used against the Palestinians, not just on the dehumanizing language toward the Palestinians. This is something that has become structural. It is so constant and subliminal that is also part of our understanding of reality. Probably not you and me, but people who are not expert would understand that Palestinians have brought havoc upon themselves because of October 7. And this is such a fallacy. But yes, so there is a responsibility of the media, like there is a responsibility of most Western governments, in fact, who have fostered the dehumanization of the Palestinians, which has been instrumental to enable the current genocide. Because it's true that many people have protested, but the majority, looking at the numbers, the majority of the people has not moved a finger. This is the reality. It's not about, even 1 million out of 6 or 60 mobilizing. It's very little. There is a genocide. They have killed 18,000 children. And we, in my own country, we have been honoring the victims of October 7, commemorating them for months and continuous. And I'm not saying this is wrong. This is totally normal. This is what compassion is. I'm just appalled that I've not seen an inch of that compassion for the 18,000 children that have been killed in Palestine. Like, I think that Daniel Levy, the way he put it recently at the UN Security Council, is the most telling of all. He said, of course, we owe 1 minute of silence to the 2 Bibas children who were taken hostages and killed with their mother in Israel, in Gaza. And we also owe 1 minute of silence to each of the 18,000 Palestinian children who have been killed in Gaza, which would make 300 hours and 2 minutes of silence. Yeah, this is the reality. How come we are so desensitized toward the Palestinians? Because we are also part of our cultures are also prone to their dehumanizations. Again, as an Italian, I'm telling you, I feel awful in describing this, because we have done it already. And there is another genocide that happened under our eyes probably not televised as this one, but we knew 1 century ago, up to 90 years ago, 80 years ago, we knew what had happened, what was happening to the Jewish people and the Roma and Sinti. The Jewish people were part of our societies, and still, all of a sudden, no more doctors, no more professors, no more neighbors. All of a sudden, they were completely dehumanized. They were a security threat. They were to be expelled, and you see, we eventually, under political pressure and exposed to heavy political propaganda, human beings behave like herds. We don't think. Our compassion stops, and this is something that for me, it's unacceptable. I really despise people who have a racial bias, and they have also the audacity of accusing others of being biased and partial.
Right.
Yeah,
No,
it's so this topic.
Yes, it's interesting you mentioned that, because I'm wondering, well, you already touched on it, if you have any insights into what this kind of complacency reveals about humankind. I almost feel naive, because before October 7th, I would never have imagined that the world would remain this complicit.
Me neither.
That it would get to this, and as you're saying, like, the ratio would be so small. I mean, do you think, like, philosophically, what that reveals about people? I mean...
That we're racist.
Yes.
We're very
We have
racist.
not progressed as much as we think.
No, but at the same time, I think that member states and international relations are still dominated by racism. And this is the litmus test. I mean, Gaza is the litmus test to expose the extent of this racial bias. But I think that collectively we are doing better. So this is why I say people shouldn't feel discouraged, because I know that it's very dark right now. But I see the sparkles of light. I see the sparkles of light because there are cracks on the wall. And if there are cracks on the wall and we see the light, it means that we need to keep on pushing to bring the wall down and not pause and not sit idle in the face of this darkness.
Yes, of course. I'm wondering if you feel that because of this genocide, your office of the Special Rapporteur will have permanently changed in ways that were never considered before, or people could never anticipate, because there is this ongoing genocide. So it will require the next rapporteur and the next rapporteur after that to undertake new sets of responsibilities, maybe to be more activist in their approach, anything like that.
I don't know, because, fundamentally, message-wise, or I don't think that I've been that different from my predecessors. I've learned a lot from them. And in terms of framework, use of the legal framework and analysis, I think I've really operated in continuity with them. Of course, the circumstances have changed. I'm 100% sure that had Michael Link or John Dugard or Richard Falk found themselves in this situation, they would have documented exactly what I have documented and probably gone to the same, arrived at the same conditions, at the same conclusions. What is probably different is the pace of the engagement. I have renounced. I've put aside my work, the teachings, the various teachings I had, and again I felt this way. Again, I did it because of the genocide. In the context of the genocide, it was unavoidable, and of course I want to resume my work, but it's also it's incredible with all what's happening. Not to, to be able to cut a line. Sometimes I would just like to see, not to deal with it anymore. I'm also tired, and I would like not to look at this horror day in and day out. I would like to pretend like others are doing that there are days without the genocide. Sometimes I would also like to forget the Palestinians, but I don't do. I don't do, not because I don't have the power, but I can't, because something inside me tells me, no, you are the special rapporteur. You are not any human being in this one. You have a responsibility. And if it were you on the other side, if it were your children, if it were your husband, if it were yourself in this situation, yes, you would like people to speak out. And there are so many people who are speaking out, who are putting themselves in the front line, facing repression, beating, harsh punishment, even arrest and detention, suspension from work. Yeah, I have to be with them, and this is probably where I've got more active. I don't think activist is the right term, but yeah, surely I've been out there because now the human rights movement needs support from all corners. But I see other special rapporteurs doing the same. We are very principled and human rights committed individuals. So like other academics or people from other professions and walks in life, you cannot stay silent in the face of a genocide.
No. It's like you said, I think that is an appropriate word, dystopian, because all these persons are being punished for doing the right thing. I mean, you're trying to stop a genocide and you're being fired or arrested or thrown in jail. I mean, for me, it forces me to question everything I was raised to believe, that if you do the right thing in life, you will somehow, I don't know, be honored or rewarded or something, but not punished. And this is what's happening, is all these people of conscience are being punished.
Yeah, but I also think that this is a reflex that people in the West have. Because for the past 80 years, which means for 3 generations plus, we have enjoyed a relative calm. In the sense, we have had no wars in our territory. Yes, there have been proxy wars during the Cold War, but mainly fought by the US and Soviet Union through or in other countries. We've never been faced with this for the past 80 years. Yes, there was the war in former Yugoslavia. Now there has been the war in Ukraine. And somewhat I see that over the past 20 years we have been desensitized, and also diplomacy has lost its function. But going back to how we react, how do we see the response of the system? Here we are challenging a system. The protection of Israel by Western states is due to the fact that Israel is part and parcel of the Western family, which is Europe and the settler colonies, the US, Canada, New Zealand and Australia. Israel is no different. Yes, it's in the Middle East, but no different than New Zealand and Australia being in the Asian continent, in the Asia Pacific. So I do believe that we need to remind ourselves that defending human rights is an unavoidable choice to improve the living reality we are in at every challenge. It has not been easy to, it has not been easy to abolish slavery. It has not been easy for women to enjoy fundamental freedoms and equal rights. Think of the right to vote. Equal rights, we're not there yet. But the right to vote, how many people have been crushed? How many lives have been crushed? How many women and others who stood with them have been put in jail or beaten or raped or killed in their fight for equal rights and equal freedoms? We are at that turn. We have forgotten. We have become too lazy in our comfort, in thinking that the government will give us everything. No, the the governments now more than ever are showing the limits. And it's fine if we stay quiet, we buy our smartphones, we go on holiday once a year, if we have money, we can vote. Yes. But we cannot protest. Yes. I'm not comfortable with that. No. For me, freedom of expression is the most fundamental right that a society has and must preserve. Yes. So, which has so many declinations and implications.
Yes.
And this is at risk right now.
Well, I almost sometimes think, I'm not sure how you feel about this, but sometimes I think of Israel as like emblematic of the West, or the West writ large, in the way it treats people, you know, take things that you want without asking, destroy all you want to get all you want. Don't be concerned about the humanity of others. I feel like
I'm often critical of the West, but I don't think this is the case. I think this is really capitalism.
Yes. Okay.
Which is not unique to the West, of course. It has rooted, first and foremost, in Western liberal democracies. But it's not unique to us. And it's true, and this is very true in the US, most probably. I mean, as a European, I see that individualism, but it's so not my culture as a Southern Italian. I mean, I feel much closer to, I mean, I've been living in Tunisia for almost 4 years now, and I've been living in Palestine for 3 years and in other places in the Arab region. Although there are many differences between my own country and here and Arab countries, I feel much closer to this culture than Northern Europe in many respects, for the good and bad. And there are so many things that I admire and I adore of Northern Europe. This culture of compassion and sharing is also very Westerner, because in the West there is also Greek, there is Southern France, there is Spain, there is Portugal, and also the people in the Balkans. We're very warm, we're very, very caring and very communal, which doesn't mean that. So there are so many things in the West that are wonderful. Even this culture of hugging. Hugging is a healing. Yes. And again, I think that there are so many beautiful things in Western culture. And also the way the legacy of the Enlightenment and the Renaissance, and there is something that has trickled down into our culture. Yes. I don't want to discard everything that the West is and has, but of course, there is the dark past, the dark colonial past that has not only affected 500 years of international relations, so our relations with whatever was the world that we have colonized. But where does it come from? It's Christianity. It's white Christian mentality that has spread. And this is why I often point to patriarchy, and people do not necessarily understand that. But it's a patriarchal society that through the Middle Age has developed and become so structurally dominant in our realities. And the struggles against patriarchy have been human rights struggle, like women's emancipation in my own country during the 60s and 70s, or other forms of liberation have been somewhat a challenge to that structure, which is patriarchy, which is capitalist, and now it's getting more and more weaponized.
I'm so glad that you mentioned Italy, your culture, because when I was preparing for this interview, I couldn't help but be curious, just sharing your culture as someone of Italian descent. Whether your culture has played, in your view, some role in being a principled person, not just with respect to Palestine, but more broadly, with respect to concern for humanity, for these issues of human rights that you're talking about, and so forth.
I'm sure it has, and it's not just the family I grew up in or the country I grew up in. It's really the communal life, this sense of taking care of one another, which is very ingrained in my upbringing. I mean, wherever I go, I say I have very strong roots in south of Italy. This is a place I still call home somewhat. But I've been traveling now, and I've been living across many countries for the past 22 years. And wherever I go, I put my roots somewhat. So I also move, and there is always a sense of community and a family of friends and others that develop. It's really, this warmth has been part of my upbringing, and it makes me probably more genuine, less defensive to the other. And I find this somewhat disarming for certain people. It's disarming because it's brutally honest. And so it's interesting because I was visiting my family, my mom recently, and I had dinner with friends, and we were discussing about my life in this public sphere that I've never really looked forward to. I mean, I'm someone who doesn't even take pictures with her children because I really don't like pictures. And all of a sudden, wherever I go, can I take a picture? I have to respond to people who really want to take pictures with me, and I say, what? And at the same time, I say, if this managed to inspire them or make them committed or make them feel, to remember this moment of oxygen and take it forward, why not? But so I was discussing how I am, and she was saying, but when I see you, the way you are, you're really that person. I mean, with us, in your private sphere, you are that person. When you say, I'm so Southern Italian, you are so Southern Italian from here, from Irpinia, this place which is, it's the end of the Apennino Mountains, and it's, so the community is close to the outside world, but so communal, and very strong and matter of fact, and it's a farmer's culture, so a strong attachment to the land, a strong attachment to the elements, in fact. I'm sure that this is part of who I am also as a persona, and it has been part of my persona even before being a special rapporteur.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much for this engaging discussion, Francesca. I'm just wondering, before we wrap things up, if there's any final thoughts or observations at all that you'd like to share. Yes.
Let me think.
Yes.
Yes. Two things. And one is very much about international law. People shouldn't be over-optimistic about international law, but they shouldn't be pessimistic either. International law is a tool, and we are lucky to have it because we have human rights thanks to other people who have been fighting in order to have those rights codified. And now for us, it should be easier to litigate and to vindicate those rights, because for many of us, especially in the West, those rights are part of our constitutional life and constitutional public life. So we should be less self-defeating and more engaging in wondering, okay, now this is my starting point. Human rights are my protection, are my armor. How am I going to use it in order to make my contribution to humanity? Because taking care of someone else who's being vilified, abused, violated is part of feeling human, is part of feeling that compassion means feeling with, feeling the sorrow of. And also, the other thing that is connected to this is that sometimes I feel that people expect change to drop from the sky. We are the change. If we don't manage to change ourselves, how we can change the environment? If we cannot, and again, and this is why I go back to the rights discourse. I see so many people being silenced and not reacting. And say, but your silence is normalizing abuse. So when I think of myself, I've always stood up for others. I've never been silent. I've been more vocal in defending others than myself. But I've also understood that I had to take care of my rights. It's something sort of innate in me, connatural to who I am as a human being before becoming a lawyer. So I wish this sense of discipline and this sense of collective self could be switched on in people. Because we are part of a bigger struggle. It's beyond Palestine. It's above us. It's about us as well. And the way I see the space for fundamental freedoms shrinking and shrinking in our own societies, in civilized Europe, is frightening and should raise alarm among all of us. So yeah, I hope that people will be more sensitive and more responsive and proactive to this.
Okay. Well, thank you again, Francesca. Very grateful for this.
Thank you for talking to me.
Yes, my pleasure, my honor. Thank you.